Okay, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, in that order to our H4ites from India, the US, Eastern Time, Central Time, Pacific Time, and I hope today San Francisco surfaces soon. Today we are going to be having episode 2 of our Passion webinar series. Part of our, this is now our 5th VC, and following the outstanding talk by Behruz, who started the ball rolling on his yearly sojourn in Balgram and Lonavala. Today we have Ramesh Rahalkar from Canada, Sarnika, right? And who has a passion for Indian classical music. And he'd like to take us through a journey of the history of Indian classical music. So we do hope that we'll have a lot more people coming up, and it was very spontaneous of Ramesh soon after Behruz's talk. So we hope we'll have more people queuing up. Hold on, you'll all get your turn, so don't worry. Okay, Ramesh, over to you. Sanjay, will you tell us the protocols? Sanjay, the protocol.
Unmute yourself. Sanjay has to unmute.
No, he's on the mute, yeah.
He's got to unmute.
I'm not able to unmute.
Yeah.
No, I'll be muting everybody, or people can mute themselves so that there is no disturbance, and then Ramesh can start sharing the screen and then start speaking.
Okay, before I start, Sanjay, are you recording this?
Yes.
Okay, so and later on, presumably you can send us a link.
I'll be sharing that. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to go to share link, share screen rather. Let's see. I hope it works. Okay, can everybody see that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we will start. I'm going to talk about not classical music itself, but the history of classical music, how it has changed through the ages. Now, I'm obviously not a professional musician. I'm an engineer, or rather, I started out as an engineer, then I became a scientist. Before my retirement, I was IT professional. But classical music is my passion. It's my hobby. When I was in India, I had music lessons for 3-4 years. And that gave me a good grounding of classical music. And if you know a little bit about classical music, you can enjoy it, you can appreciate it much better than if you don't know anything at all. And so whatever I come across over last, 40, 50 years, I thought I would share some of that with you today. Now, when one thinks of classical music, the first thought might be classical music doesn't change at all. After all, the same raga that people are singing 50, 100 years ago, they're singing them today. Same bandishes. By the way, bandish means song in classical music. The same bandish they were singing 50, 100 years ago, they're singing them today. So maybe the first thought would be that classical music doesn't change. But that's not true. Over the ages, the classical music has gone through many changes, and we are going to look at some of those changes today. And as we go along, I'll be doing some singing also to illustrate the points that I'll be making. Okay, so let's look at classical music journey through the ages. Now, how do I change the slide?
Just push the right arrow key.
Right arrow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got it. Yeah. Okay. So our narrative starts 700-800 years ago, maybe in 12th century AD. The classical music went through a big transition in 12th century AD. It transitioned from Prabandha Gayan to Drupad Gayan. The big difference was that Prabandha's Bandish had 32 lines in it, while Drupad Bandish had only 8 lines in it. It had 4 parts, 2 lines each, and 8 lines altogether. The 4 parts were Astai, Antara, Sanchari, and Abhog. And so the song basically cut down by 1/4 of its original size, and that was a big change. Now, the Drupad music originated in mandir as devotional music, singing the praises of God. Now you can imagine in a mandir, you have got this devotee or a gayak singing in front of the God. I mean, there is nobody besides him. He usually by himself. So in Drupad, alapi or a rag development is done without any kind of musical accompaniment. There is no instrument accompaniment, no tabla, nothing. The only instrument gayak can have is tambora or tanpura, just to set the scale, that's all. And so the alapi or rag development is done without the help of any of the instruments, harmonium or voice. There's nothing like that. Now, alapi is done in the following way. You chant this mantra, Om Namo Ananga Hari Narayana, over and over again, and you do rag development using that mantra. You display all the features of the raga and so on using that mantra. And let me illustrate that to you. Excuse me. This is rag todi. Om Namo Ananga Hari Narayana. 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 So like this, he will do the rag development for an hour or more. He will start at a slow pace or a vilambit lay. He will go on to medium pace, madhyam lay, and he would finish the alapi in the fast pace or druta lay. And so over an hour or more, he will develop the raga completely, display all its features and so on. And after that, he will sing the bandish, Drupad bandish, for 15 or 20 minutes. At least initially, it used to be just the praise of God, although it doesn't have to be that way. And so the bandish should be for 15, 20 minutes. And then during the bandish, there's of course all kinds of accompaniment. There are musical instruments. There could be tabla, or in those days, of course, it was more likely mrudanga rather than tabla. But so during bandish, there was all kinds of accompaniment. And so altogether, Drupad would last, I don't know, maybe hour and a half, something like that, including alapi and bandish. Now, eventually what happened was, Drupad migrated out of the mandir into the general population. It became popular. More gayak wanted to sing Drupad. Many Muslim gayak wanted to sing Drupad, and they had a problem with this mantra. They didn't want to sing a Hindu mantra for more than an hour. And also, some Hindu gayak also had problem with the mantra. When gayak is doing the alapi, he is concentrated totally on rag development to the exclusion of everything else. And then if he also has to say some words, it's quite possible he might get a letter or two wrong or a word or two wrong here and there. And you can't do that when you're singing the praise of the Lord. You can't make a mistake. And so if his attention is divided between chanting the mantra and rag development, he really cannot do full justice to rag development. And so some Hindu gayak also had objection to the mantra. And so as a result of that, the mantra was changed. There was a transformation again. Alapi was replaced by Nomtom. Now what does Nomtom means? It means nothing. Nomtom is gibberish. And that's exactly what happened. Alapi was replaced by gibberish. The mantra was replaced by gibberish or just meaningless syllables to do rag development. Again, I'll illustrate. This is from rag Adana. Tanana tanam diriri tanam tom tiridi tanadere na tanadere na tanadere na. Like this, the Gayak would do alapi or rag development. Now everything else remained the same. He would do alapi, vilambit, madhyalay, dhruta, and so on, followed by bandish. Everything else was same, but the mantra, the chant, was replaced by alapi, and this went on for hundreds of years. As I mentioned, Tansen in Akbar's darbar, he was a Drupad singer. Now, also there was another accompanying style of singing that was called dhamar. Normally, dhamar would follow Drupad, but there's some differences between Drupad and dhamar. One is that Drupad could be, the Drupad bandish could be in any tal, any of the several tals that are available. That there could be, there is 3 tal, 16 beat, jap tal, 10 beat, ek tal, 12 beat, or kerwa, ada chautal, rupak. There were so many of them, and Drupad bandish could be in any of those tal. But dhamar bandish can only be in one tal. There is a tal called dhamar, and dhamar bandish can only be in dhamar tal, that is 14 beat. Also, dhamar was restrictive as to the subject of the bandish. Drupad bandish, although as I said initially it was mostly praising the god, but it could be on any subject under the sun. There are no restrictions. But dhamar is mostly about one subject only: Krishna and Gopi playing Holi. There are very few dhamar bandishes which deal with monsoon, but most of them are deal with only one subject, playing Holi. Now dhamar, it's a light, considerably light, gentle, playful singing. Drupad is a serious thing, singing. So after you are saying something serious for an hour or more, you are in mood for something light, something gentle, and that's what dhamar is. Now I'm going to give a couple of examples of dhamar. But these are not exactly dhamar bandishes, but this gives you some idea as to what dhamar bandishes would be like. This one is in rag kafi. आज खेलो श्याम संग होरी, आज खेलो श्याम संग होरी, पिचकारी रंग भरी केसर की, पिचकारी रंग भरी केसर की, आज खेलो श्याम संग होरी, आज खेलो श्याम संग होरी, कुंवर कन्हैया संग सखी राधा, कुंवर कन्हैया संग सखी राधा, रंग भरी जोड़ी सोहतरी, रंग भरी जोड़ी सोहतरी, आज खेलो श्याम संग होरी, आज खेलो श्याम संग होरी. This one is from Rag Takkamod. Excuse me. Dari, 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 pichakari, dari, 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 पिचकारी केसर रंग भरी भीगत सजनी, केसर रंग भरी भीगत सजनी, डारी डारी डारी, पिचकारी डारी डारी डारी, पिचकारी, बाट घाट सब रोकत ठाड़े, बाट घाट सब रोकत ठाड़े, जाने न पावे न एकन नगरी, जाने न पावे न एकन नगरी, डारी डारी डारी, पिचकारी डारी डारी डारी, pichakari. So this is the type of bandish that constitutes dhamar. So in the old days, suppose there's a concert, the Mahfil, and 3-4 different gayak they are going to sing. So then the gayak would sing Drupad for maybe hour and a half, Damar for 15-20 minutes, altogether 1.5 to 2 hours, and then he's done. Now Drupad remained popular for several hundred years. In Akbar's Darbar, Tansen, Baiju Bawra, they were Drupad singers. Now it was all Drupad singing in Akbar's Darbar. Now let's fast forward from Akbar to Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was the last powerful Mughal emperor. After him, there were many weak, ineffectual emperors. And the second last emperor was Muhammad Shah. The last emperor was Bahadur Shah. The British defeated Bahadur Shah in war. He went into exile, and that was the end of Mughal Empire. In Muhammad Shah's time, Drupad morphed into a different type of singing. Drupad singing morphed into Khayal singing. Around that time, Maratha kingdom was ruled by Bajirao II. He was also the last king of Maratha kingdom. British again defeated him in a war. He went into exile, and that was the end of Maratha kingdom, and that way British got control of all of India. Now, Bajirao, but ironically, in these times of physical decline, there was a kind of renaissance of art, of music, of dancing, of culture. Now, Bajirao, he convened a big conference in Tanjavur, a conference of singers, dancers, performers. And in that conference, they decided to revive Bharatanatyam. In those days, Bharatanatyam was dying out. But this conference revived Bharatanatyam. And that is why in the annals of Bharatanatyam, there is a pride of place for Bajirao and for Tanjavur. And at that time, around that time, Drupad was morphing into Khayal. In the Darbar of Muhammad Shah, there were two poets, Diamat Khan and Diamat Khan. Now, they were Muslims, of course, but they adopted Hindu nicknames, Sadarang and Adarang. Now, they themselves were Drupad singers, but they wrote a lot of bandishes for Khayal. Now, this was around maybe 250 years ago. But the bandishes that they wrote are popular even today. Many gayak, they use Sadarang and Adarang bandishes to sing Khayal. Okay, we covered that. They wrote many of the Khayal bandishes. I'm going to give you two examples of their bandishes. This one is by Adarang in the Rag Desi. सच कहत है अदारंग यह, सच कहत है अदारंग यह, नदी नाव संजो, नदी नाव संजो, सच कहत है अदारंग यह, सच कहत है अदारंग यह, कौन किसी के आगे जाए, कौन किसी के आगे जाए, दाना पानी किस्मत लाए, दाना पानी किस्मत लाए, सब लोग, सच है अदारंग यह, सच कहत है अदारंग यह, नदी नाव संजोग, नदी नाव संजोग. This one is from by Sadaranga in Rag Bibhas. कयेस कुमरवा जाय न हमरा, कयेस कुमरवा जाय न हमरा, Muhammad Shah ke sada rangile. So here he mentions Muhammad Shah. He mentions his own name, of course, Sadaranga, and he also achieved the double meaning here, Sadaranga and Sada Rangile. मोहम्मद शाह के सदा रंगीले प्रेम पिया जपते अपने प्रेम पिया जपते अपने ऊपर तन मन वाहु देते ऊपर तन मन वाहु देते कैस कुमरवा जाय न हमरा कैस कुमरवा जाय न हमरा. Incident is a Bandish is about Yashoda. She is wondering, Mera Kanhaiya kahan gaya? Now, Sadarang and Adaranga, they were both Muslims, but they have written many Bandishes dealing with Hindu gods and Hindu goddesses. Around that time, there was also evolution of musical instruments, along with evolution of music itself. There was evolution of musical instruments. Rudra Veena, that's a very ancient instrument, thousands of years old. There are mentions of Samudragupta, Chandragupta, kings like that playing the Rudra Veena. Then there was Veena, and from Veena developed into sitar. Or there was Mridanga, then Pakhwaj, developed into tabla. Then there were instruments that came from abroad. Harmonium, violin, they came with the British. And these days they are very popular in Indian music. Indeed, these days it's really very difficult to imagine a maifil without harmonium accompaniment. It's almost always there. Then there are other instruments which one doesn't see as much, which are rare, but still one sees them from time to time. These are imported, like guitar or mandolin or clarinet. So the evolution in music went alongside with evolution in musical instruments. Now, what's the difference? What are differences between Drupad and Khayal? We saw that Drupad Bandish had 8 lines, Astai, Antara, Sanchari, and Abhog. Khayal Bandish is only 4 lines. Astai and Antara, they got rid of Sanchari and Abhog. And then Drupad Bandish we saw, in Drupad singing, in Alapi, there is no musical instrument accompaniment of any kind. Because first there is Alapi and then they sing Bandish. In Khayal, what happens is, they start with Bandish right at the beginning, right from the word go. And then all the Alapi is done inside the Bandish, not before the Bandish. There will be Vilambit, Madhyam, Lay, Druta, everything, but that's done inside the Bandish and not before the Bandish. And so there is, of course, the instrument accompaniment right from the beginning to the end. Instrument accompaniment, tabla accompaniment, it's throughout the singing. While Drupad, there is accompaniment only the last 15-20 minutes while he's singing the Bandish. Again, so Drupad Bandish lasts 15-20 minutes. Khayal Bandish, since Alapi is all done throughout with the help of Bandish, within the Bandish Khayal Bandish will easily last for hour and a half during the duration of the singing. So there were some important differences between Drupad and Khayal. Now, how has Alapi developed? What are the different styles of Alapi compared to Drupad or Nomtom or Khayal? I'll demonstrate it here. This is Rag Malakons. Some of you may have heard the name Rag Malakons. It's a very popular rag. First, I'm going to just sing the swar as they are written there. Sa ga ma da ma da ma ga ma da ma ga ma da ni sa da ni da ma ga ma da ma. Now, the Drupad Alapi would go like this with the mantra, with the chant. Om Namo Ananga Harinarayana. Om Namo Ananga Harinarayana. In the later stages of Drupad, the Alapi or Nomtom would be like this. Ta-na na na ta-na tim ta-na na 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 ta-na de-re na 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 tim ta-na dir-dim ta-na. How would the Alapi go in Khayal? Khayal, I mentioned that all the Alapi is done inside the Bandish, so we need a Bandish. So Paga La Gana De, it's a very popular Bandish in Rag Malakams. So let's start with that. Pagala Ganade Pagala Ganade So you can see how Alapi has changed over the ages. It has gone through different transformations, and that's how the Khayal Alapi is done, and that's how it's done today. Now, I mentioned that Sadarang and Adarang have written many of the Khayal Bandishes, but other writers also have written Khayal Bandishes. And in classical music, many of the Gayak, they write their own Bandishes, which is unlike, say, popular music or film music. In a film music, the singer doesn't write his own song, or he doesn't even set music to it. Somebody else does that. He only sings it. Now, in classical music, that's also permitted. There's nothing wrong with that. Many times a Gayak would sing Bandish written by somebody else, Sadarang, Adarang, or even anybody. It doesn't matter. But sometimes he would also, a Gayak would compose his own Bandish. And some of them are very good at it too. Now, here I'm giving you an example of one Bandish. This is in Rag Adana. Aaye more darbar, aaye more darbar, tan se na baiju bavare, tan se na baiju bavare, aaye more darbar, aaye more darbar. शुभ घड़ी शुभ दिन गुनी जन आये, शुभ घड़ी शुभ दिन गुनी जन आये, सूर ताल अति महिमा लाये, सूर ताल अति महिमा लाये, आये मोरे दरबार, आये मोरे दरबार. Now, when I heard this Bandish the first time, I thought this must be really an ancient Bandish, because after all, it talks about Akbar's Darbar, Tansen, Baiju Bawra there entering the Darbar. But clearly, this is not written by Sadarang or Adarang, because their name doesn't appear anywhere in the Bandish. So I wondered, does the Bandish go back maybe to Tansen's time? Maybe is it 500 years old? But later on, I discovered that it was written by Ram Marathe, a well-known Marathi classical singer, and it was probably written in 70s or 80s. So it's not 500 years old, it's 50 years old. Now, in popular music or film music, a 50-year-old song would be considered an old song. But in classical music, 50 years old, wo kal ka bachcha hai. Nothing to it. But anyway, so the Bandish is very good, and he has done a very good job of writing it. So I just wanted to give you as an example. Now, I said the Khayal Bandish has 4 lines, but it doesn't have to have 4 lines. I would say maximum it's 4 lines, but sometimes the Bandish will have just 2 lines. And here is an example. Asthai, Jabahi sab nirapata nirasa bhaye, that's Asthai. Antara, Gurupada Kamala Vande Raghupati, Chapa Samipa Gaye. Incidentally, the Bandish is about Sita Swayamvar. Now, So Bandish has only 2 lines, and sometimes Gayak may not even bother singing Antara. He might just stay with Astai. And so, Jabahi Saba Nirapata Nirasa Bhaye, using this one line, he will do the whole rag development for hour and a half in the Khayal. And so, it's really the Bandish in Khayal is more as a prop, something to support the Alapi. Alapi is the main action. Now, how does this go? This is Rag Bhoop. Uh, जब ही सबनी जब ही सबनी So this is how a Gayak would do a rag development. Now this will go on for hour and more. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing for hour and more. जब ही सब नीरपत निरास भये जब ही सब नीरपत निरास भये गुरुपद कमल वंदे रघुपति गुरुपद कमल वंदे रघुपति चाप समीप गए चाप समीप गए जब ही सबनी जब ही सब नीरपत निर्भये जब ही सबनी जब ही सबनी जब ही सबनी So here I gave you a jhalak as to how he would sing a khayal. The only difference is I sang it only for 2 minutes. He would sing it maybe for hour and a half. Now, which are some of the Drupad singers? These days, it's mostly khayal singing. An overwhelming number of Gayak, they sing khayal. Very few of them sing Drupad. But there are some Gayak who have kept the Drupad singing tradition alive. And in those Gayak, lion's share goes to Dagar Bandhu. Dagar Bandhu, they are Muslims. They have been singing Drupad for 30 generations. Not 30 years, 30 generations. So now if you do some calculations, you will realize that this goes way before even Tansen's time. This probably goes right to the time when Drupad started, at the time of inception of Drupad. And so Dagar Bandhu have been singing Drupad probably since its inception. They were not always Bandhu. I mean, you can control these things. And sometimes they had to co-opt somebody, a Gayak from outside, and call him Dagar Bandhu. But they have been going on for 30 generations, and they're still going strong. And really, the reason Drupad tradition is alive today is because of Dagar Bandhu. They are very good, very dedicated, and they have kept the Drupad singing alive by themselves, really. Then there's Gundecha brothers. Unfortunately, one of them died recently. So now there's only one left. Uday Bhavalkar, Ritvik Sanyal. There are a few others also, but not very many, just a handful, I would say. Most of them are khayal singers. But the Drupad singing tradition is kept alive because of these people. Now, we saw that after singing Drupad, a Gayak would sing something light, something playful, Dhamar. That way, after singing Khayal, he would sing something light, and it's called Thumri. Now, when Gayak sings Khayal, he sings a raga. A raga has a rigid structure. Which swars are allowed, which are komal, which are shuddha, which are varja, and so on. Which is vadi, that which is the most important swar, which is samvadi, which is the second important swar. What is the chalan of the raga? These are all fixed rules, and the Gayak cannot deviate from them. Like, for instance, let me give an example. I sang the Bhoop raga. If the Gayak is singing Bhoop and he sings, that's not allowed. That would be a big no-no, and that would ruin his reputation. So in the rag, when he's singing rag, he has to rigidly stick with raga structure. A thumri usually would nominally have a rag associated with it. There are not very many rags which are suitable for thumri, maybe 4 or 5, but like Khamaj or Pilu or Bhairavi, things like that. So nominally there will be a rag associated with thumri, but a Gayak has a full freedom to sing anything he wants in the raga. So he can let his imagination go, he can innovate, he can bring in new ideas into thumri. Everything is permitted in thumri. And so that's why thumri is considered a light. And it's not considered classical because there is no pure raga. It's considered semi-classical style of singing. And really, Gayak can do pretty much anything he wants in thumri. I remember when I was in India, I attended a mahfil by Lakshman Prasad Jaipurwale. Now, this was, of course, long time ago. I left India in 1971. I left India right after the IIT final exam. Our exam was in April. I left India in September. But so this was before that. So Lakshman Prasad Jaipurwale, in the beginning, he sang a khayal in Rag Multani. And after that, he was singing Thumri. While singing Thumri, at one point in Thumri, he sang Mapaga Madha Nisadha Ni Re. And those who couldn't understand what he was singing, he explained what he was doing there. He said, Udar Hamir, Idar Jaijavanti. Mapaga Madha is Rag Hamir, Nisadha Ni Re is Rag Jaijavanti. After that, he said he's going to sing all 12 swar consecutively one by one. So like sa to upper sa. Totally there are 12 swars in there. Komal, Shuddha, Varja, so on, everything. They're 12 swars. And what he said was he was going to sing all of them one by one consecutively from sa to sa. Now, so sa, then there is Komal Re, Shuddha Re, Komal Ga, Shuddha Ga, Komal, and so on. So, and he sang all 12 of them one by one consecutively. So, in a thumri, a Gayak is allowed to roam freely. Even he's allowed to have some fun. So, thumri is like a fun style of singing. Now, this is unlike dhamar. Dhamar is very much a classical singing, same as Drupad. In dhamar also, a Gayak must stick rigidly to the structure of the raga. He is not allowed to deviate. Same as Drupad or dhamar or khayal. A Gayak must rigidly stick to the rules of the raga with the constraints of the raga. But in thumri, anything goes. Sab kuch chalta hai. Now here is an example of a thumri. It's in rag Mishra Khamaj. Now, in thumri, since anything is allowed in the in thumri, the rag is always a Mishra rag. So it's not just rag Khamaj. It is Mishra Khamaj, or say there'll be Mishra Pillu or Mishra Bhairavi, whatever. In thumri, the rag is always a Mishra rag. So let's see how this one goes. सावरिया से नैना हो गए चार हाय राम लागी करे जवा कटार लागी करे जवा कटार सावरिया से नैना हो गए चार हाय राम लागी करे जवा कटार बूंद ना गिरा बूंद ना गिरा एक लहू का बूंद ना गिरा एक लहू का कछु ना रहे निशानी निशानी कछु ना रहे निशानी निशानी कछु ना रहे निशानी कछु ना रहे निशानी मन घायल पर तन पे छाई मन घायल मोरा मन घायल मोरा मन घायल पर तन पे छाई मीठी ठीस सुहानी मीठी ठीस सुहानी मीठी ठीस सुहानी सखीरी मैं तो 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 सुध बुध बैठ बिसार सखीरी मैं तो सुध बुध बैठ बिसार लागी करे जवा कटार लागी करे जवा कटार सावरिया से सावरिया से सावरिया से सावरिया से सावरिया से नैना हो गए चार हाय राम लागी करे जवा कटार लागी करे जवा कटार. So that is how Thumri goes. Now we have some time left, so I'll finish with this one anyway. This is what I like to call a pseudo bandish. In the sense, it looks like a bandish. You got astai, you got antara. It sounds like a bandish. Now you may have noticed that all the bandishes that are presented so far, the language is Hindi, old Hindi, not the modern day Hindi, but old Hindi. Now, if you see here, this is also written in old Hindi. So the language is right, the formation is right. It sounds like a bandish. Let me demonstrate. This is in Rag Vasant. के केतकी गुलाब जूही चंपक बन फूले केतकी गुलाब जूही चंपक बन फूले ऋत बसंत अपन कांत गोरी गरवाल गाए ऋतु बसंत अपन कांत गोरी गरवाल गाए झूलन पे बैठ आज पी के संग झूले झूलन पे बैठ आज पी के संग झूले केतकी गुलाब जूही चंपक बन फूले केतकी गुलाब जूही चंपक बन फूले केतकी गुलाब जूही केतकी गुलाब जूही केतकी गुलाब जूही चंपक बन फूले So it sounds like a bandish, but yet you won't see any gayak using this to sing a khayal. The reason for that is this is a song from a movie, a movie called Basanta Bahar. The scene there is that a classical music gayak is singing in a darbar in front of the king. So they wrote a song for that occasion to look just like a bandish. And I think they have done a very good job of imitating the bandish. It's like somebody forging, say, a master art by Picasso or somebody like that and doing an excellent forgery. So you can tell it from the original. So this is like that. It's a very good imitation of a bandish. Incidentally, in the movie itself, it's a jugalbandi between Bhimsen Joshi and Manna Dey. I don't know how many of you are aware, but Manna Dey was an excellent classical music singer. Okay, so now we journeyed through 700-800 years. What of the future? Changes happen in classical music slowly, with glacial slowness. Now, Drupad endured for several hundred years, at least 500-600 years. There is no reason why Khayal cannot endure that long or even longer. But the changes are always occurring around the fringes, on the edges. And I can notice a few changes even in my lifetime. One change is about tabla. When I was a kid, tabla was just that instrument of accompaniment. But nowadays, if a gayak is singing khayal for 1 hour, he would say, he would give a few minutes, a fragment of music over and over again. He may not even done that. He may ask harmonium or violin player to play that same snatch again and again. And then there is a time for Tabalji to show his skills. What can he do? And so Tabalji can come into his own for a few minutes. Another difference is that when I was a kid, I had never ever seen a female tabla player. Maybe it's because the male-dominated society of India. Maybe tabla was considered too robust an instrument, not suitable for the tender, dainty hands of women. I don't know. But I did not see a single female tabla player. Nowadays, female tabla players are quite common. Then some of them are experimenting with fusion of Indian classical music with Western classical music. Some are experimenting with bandish. Why write bandish only in old Hindi? Where does it say that it has to be old Hindi? Why not modern day Hindi? Why not other languages? I came across a gayak on internet who writes bandishes in English. Why not? So these changes keep on happening all the time. Some will be incorporated into the main body of the music. Some will die out. So where will the music, classical music be in a few hundred years? I don't know. Will khayal die out, morph into something else, or will it still be around? Nobody knows. But one thing is for sure. Indian classical music is something unique in the world. There is nothing like that anywhere else in the world. And that's a part of our culture, our heritage, that we can be justly proud of. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Ramesh, for this lovely journey. Made it so simple.
That was great. That was really good.
Thank you.